In the jagged mountains of Afghanistan, a young combat medic named Lieutenant Naomi Vega was about to make a decision that would shatter every rule in the military handbook. What started as a routine escort through a narrow wadi at dawn took a shocking turn when her convoy was torn apart by a coordinated ambush that sealed 456 Marines in a kill zone with no way out. Lieutenant Naomi Vega wasn't your typical field medic. For 6 disciplined years, she had lived by procedure and precision, a soldier who believed that order was the only thing keeping chaos at bay. Known for her iron composure and surgical calm, she had never once broken a rule, not even when it cost her brother his life. When Naomi encountered a field of wounded Marines pinned under relentless fire, she had no idea she was about to ignite one of the most defiant rescues in modern military history. Instead of holding position as ordered, she took command, turning medical triage into battlefield strategy, rigging vehicles into shields, converting water tubes into IV lines, and leading a ragged band of survivors through 5 days of isolation and blood-soaked ingenuity. What began as a textbook rescue mission would become a mutiny of compassion, a medic's rebellion against silence and bureaucracy. And when the smoke cleared, the entire U.S. Marine Corps would have to reckon with one undeniable truth. The soldier who broke the rules had rewritten what it means to serve with honor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountains woke with explosions. A white dawn was just unzipping the horizon when the first IED went off, an iron fist punching the wadi, throwing sand, shrapnel, and a wall of heat that flattened voices into raw sound. Trucks bucked, radios hiccuped, smoke boiled up and turned the sky the color of bruised apricot. Lieutenant Naomi Vega was already moving, her aid bag thumping her ribs, boots carving fresh tracks through dust and spent brass. Someone was screaming. Someone wasn't. "Eyes on! Eyes on!" Hawk's voice cracked over the platoon net, one of the only signals that still bled through the static. "PKM nest, 3 o'clock on the saddle." A chain burst raked the column, bullets walking across windshields and armor like impatient fingers. A second IED collapsed the far mouth of the pass with a noise that felt like the earth had coughed up its spine. The wadi became a bottle, corks hammered in at both ends. Naomi slid behind a blown tire, her hands already in motion. Hydration bladder, cut the hose, splice with cannula. She worked by instinct and muscle memory, turning water and plastic into an IV rig for the first Marine she reached, a kid with freckles and a belly wound that pulsed red with each shallow breath. "Stay with me," she said, voice low, steady, as her fingers knotted tubing. "You hear that? That's you breathing. That means we have time." He blinked at her, eyes glossy. The dog tag on his chest flashed in the dust-filtered light. Same model. Same dull nick at the corner where metal met chain. For one sliver of a second, the world shifted sideways, and she saw another chest, another tag, another boy who'd waited for orders that never gave him back his blood. Naomi swallowed the memory whole and went on. "Wrench," she called without looking up. "Present," Sergeant Kowalski answered, sliding in on his knees, grease-slick, grinning like a man trying to convince his nerves this was a joke. "Good news, the truck's dead. Bad news, so are the brakes." "Pressure plates," Naomi said. "There'll be a chain of them on that axle scar." "Copy." He jerked a thumb toward the winch rigged to the tow hook. "We're fishing without stepping." 20 meters away, Captain Elijah Monroe was a silhouette against the smoke, one hand raised, the other pointing, calm as a lighthouse. He started to shout when the mortar fell short and the overpressure hammered him down. He didn't get back up. Noor lay belly down behind a berm, eyes narrowed, headset cupped. The interpreter's voice was sandpaper soft, translating a scratchy, stolen burst the SIGINT corporal had caught in the chaos. A jabber of coordinates, the word for mop up repeated like a mantra. Her gaze found Naomi's. "They're waiting to finish." "Copy," Naomi said, and heard herself from a distance, measured, certain, the tone that made hands move in the right order. She taped the makeshift IV to Freckles, pivoted, crab-crawled to the next shape in the dust. Bullets buzzed like wasps. The air smelled like burned rubber and wet copper. Time doubled and halved, stretching, snapping, stretching again. Somewhere in there she started a second line, jammed gauze into a neck, sealed a sucking chest with the palm of her hand until she could peel a plastic wrapper flat and glue it with sweat. "Birds are denied," the air controller said, voice thin with fury. "Man pads in the valleys. Medevac negative." HQ finally bled through, a higher, colder frequency. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Cortez's voice was clipped and clean. "All units in Delta, hold position. Reinforcements en route. ETA unknown. Repeat, hold position. Do not maneuver."
Do not maneuver. Naomi looked up the wadi, at the rock-teeth ridgelines chewing the light, at the way the enemy's fire bracketed their world into a geometry of hurt. Hold meant bleeding quietly until the math finished the job. Hold meant writing names for families instead of pulses for medics. Hawk slid in beside her, cheek gray with dust, eyes lit with a feverish light. He jerked his chin toward the rise. "Give me 10 minutes to get that PKM." "No," Naomi said, and pushed a hemostat into his hand. "Give me pressure. 2 fingers, don't move them." He blinked at the tool, then at her, then settled his weight and became a clamp. "Yes, ma'am." Wrench's grappling line arced out, bit metal, and dragged. A pressure plate shivered and popped harmlessly under the drag path. A chain failure broken from 30 meters. "That's one snake with a busted back," he muttered, sweat carving clean lines through his dust. The first Marine with the hydration IV squeezed Naomi's sleeve. He was hearing. He was there. She squeezed back and moved again. Cortez's voice came once more like a rule etched into steel. Do not maneuver. Naomi lifted her head and saw the battalion as a map inside her skull. Where the blood was, where the rock cut vision, where the valley funneled wind and sound. She saw the math of hold, and she saw the ledger of it too, with her brother's name at the top, and room under it for boys with freckles, and girls with crow's feet, and men with creased sleeves and steady hands. Her breath came slow. She could hear it. She needed to. "Doc," Hawk said, eyes flicking between her and Monroe's crumpled shape. "What are we doing?" Naomi Vega looked at the past that had become a bottle and decided to shatter the glass. "We're not holding," she said. The earth trembled again. The ambush wasn't over, but a line inside her was, and it would not be redrawn. The culvert was a cave painted in soot and light. Inside, chaos had edges. Naomi knelt by a map whose corners had been scorched into curls and traced 3 routes with a gloved fingertip. One along a goat path Noor remembered from a wedding caravan, one through a dry irrigation cut, and one that didn't exist yet except inside Naomi's breath, the corridor she would make with will and timing and lies. Monroe lay on a folded tarp, face pale under the grime, pulse steady, but a stranger to his own limbs for now. Someone had taped his name to his chest plate, a field habit meant for the worst days. Naomi pulled a Sharpie from her sleeve and wrote underneath in neat block letters, "If I'm wrong, court-martial me." She blew on the ink until it seized. "Lieutenant," Hawk said from the mouth of the culvert. The title sounded like a question wrapped in a growl. "Orders are clear." "So's the casualty curve," Naomi said, not unkind. She pointed to the map, to Noor, to the ragged silhouette of Wrench leaning over a scavenged tailgate, stripping it for hardware. "We pull out and up, lateral across to the ridge. We pick up the guys who popped that flare before they're a legend with no bodies to prove it. We keep moving by night, and we make daylight mean something again." Wrench waggled a sawzall he'd liberated. He coughed and died. He grinned anyway. I can make sleds. He slapped the tailgate, which clanged like hope remembering itself. Door panels, hood skins. We pop holes, tie paracord, skids like butter if I waxed them with gun oil. Nor tilted the headset off one ear. Red filters. We use headlamps, we gel them. Good for night vision, less scatter. Chem-light breadcrumb trail. Half-life broken and taped low under rock lips. We can find our way back in the dark by touching the wall. Hawk stared at the map, then at Monroe, then at Naomi. Heat climbed the back of his neck. I was with your brother, he said softly, as if the culvert needed reminding. We waited. Naomi didn't flinch. I know. Hawk's voice buckled. The ceiling dripped once, a tiny sound that felt like a year. We thought we were doing it right. You were, Naomi said. Then the ground changed under you. I'm not letting it change under me with my eyes closed. Silence pooled, not unfriendly, nor broke it with the sound of paper. A printed message, cued during the last open window, stuttered into her hands from the hacked SAT handset Wrench had convinced to behave with a battery array and whispered threats. Cortez's voice came out clean as polished bone. All movement is unauthorized. Medical personnel are to remain with current positions. Do not risk further loss. Hold. Noor's eyes went to Naomi. If you go, I go, she said. I didn't ask, Naomi replied. You didn't have to. Wrench raised a hand like a kid in a classroom. For the record, ma'am, if we hold here much longer, the rats will start charging us rent.
Naomi looked around the culvert, faces lit arsenic green by the slapped-on chem sticks, fear braided into focus, hands ready without knowing what they were ready for until someone told them. She told them. We move in 6 minutes, she said. Teams of 4, litters on skids. You drop your pride, you carry a corner, or you stay and become someone else's corner. Your choice. Hawk's mouth flattened, then loosened. I'll take Overwatch, he said, and point. No, Naomi said. No one dies avenging. We move and we live. That's the only violence I'll sign today. Hawk's eyes met hers. For a moment they were two people holding a memory that didn't belong to anyone else. He nodded. Then I'll keep your back. They worked. Wrench and 2 Marines turned doors into sleds, punching holes, threading cord, rounding sharp edges with a file so they wouldn't snag on rock. Noor slid a red candy wrapper into squares and taped them behind the lenses of headlamps, turning their light into a hush. Marines stripped their gear to fighting weight. Panic made a pass at the culvert. Naomi met it at the threshold with a breathing drill her father had taught her. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. And the culvert breathed with her, a slow bellows that sounded like belief. She knelt by Monroe once more, smoothed the strip of tape along his shoulder where the Sharpie bled through. Sir, she said quietly, you trained me to follow orders until orders got somebody killed. I'm following you now. The last of the sun took its ball and went home. Night rolled down the wadi with the weight of a curtain. Outside, the world changed colors again, this time to absence. No edges, no depth, just the scrape of boot on grit and the sound of a sled whispering over stone. They moved. Noor's goat path was exactly that, a ribbon sketched onto shale with the hooves of animals that didn't believe in straight lines. The first sled snagged on a rock lip. Wrench dropped to his belly and planed the angle with a pry bar, grunting, "Easy, sweetheart," to the aluminum, which somehow obeyed. Hawk ghosted the edge, his rifle a thought poured into metal, eyes counting distances no one else could see. The first rescue window opened when the mortar men below took their smoke break. In the pause, voices carried. From the ridge came a thin flare, brief as the life of a moth, then gone. Aspen. Survivors. 10 minutes, Naomi breathed, in and out. They were, except for the part where the hillside tried to cough them into open ground. Noor whistled, a shepherd's call, low and lilting, a lullaby for goats and men with rifles. The enemy patrol veered wide, chasing a sound that had belonged to this valley longer than any of them had. Naomi's hands found a throat that wouldn't open and made it a throat again. A pen barrel, a slice of tubing, the soft pop of relief when breath chooses to live. The Marine's eyes flooded. Naomi's didn't. Move, she said. They pulled 2, then 4, then 6.
Rally Point Aspen was a collapsed caravanserai with a roof like a broken jaw and walls that had held other lives. They tucked bodies into the shadowed teeth and left water and a promise, "We'll circle back." They marked the stones with mud glyphs nor painted with her fingers, simple, sure, the kind of language the valley understood. The chemlight breadcrumbs kissed the rock at ankle height, an unseen constellation only a hand could touch. Cortez's message repeated inside the SAT handset, like a conscience with bad timing. Hold, hold, hold. Naomi looked down at her palms, at the scrape lines and dried blood, at the slight tremor that had started when she saw a dog tag and hadn't stopped because she told it to. She flexed her fingers and found them steady enough to carry an end of a sled. She took it. When the moon refused to rise, they left without her. They slid back into the culvert sometime after midnight, 6 more souls awake and breathing. The culvert smelled like diesel and iron and a thin, stubborn thread of eucalyptus from the balm Nor had dabbed under her nose against the stench of blood. Naomi set her end of the sled down and listened. Out in the dark, something clinked against stone. Not a bell, not a goat. Metal on metal, like a man learning the slope with his boot. "Listening post," Hawk whispered. "Close." Naomi lifted a hand. The culvert stilled, everyone's breath caught in their throats. The sound passed, slid away, slid back, then faded. A patrol tracing a pattern Naomi could already see breaking. She checked Monroe one more time. Still out, still warm. The Sharpie words glared up at her like a dare. She met them and didn't blink. "Dawn," she said. "We widened the net." Outside, the mountains waited, teeth in their mouths, old and patient. Inside, a medic took command, and the night accepted the change. The moon stayed on the far side of the world, stingy with its light. Black air pooled along the switchbacks, thick enough to touch. The path was a goat's argument with gravity, sketched in slivers, vanished in scree, returned in a narrow ledger line etched under a lip of rock that could hide a battalion if it held its breath.
"Hand on the wall," Naomi whispered. "2 fingers. If you lose it, you stop. We come to you." Red-gelled headlamps flickered like embers cupped in palms. Chemlight crumbs, thumb-length bricks taped low under calcified ledges, made a tactile constellation. The sled rails whispered over stone, a sound like pages turning quickly. Naomi counted the breaths she could hear, the wet rasp of a chest wound behind her, the high, controlled inhales from Noor just ahead, the stiffer, soldierly exhales from Hawk beyond, where darkness leaned harder. Somewhere below, men with rifles argued in a language the ridge had known longer than English or Dari. Noor lifted her chin and let a shepherd's call unspool from the cave of her mouth. 2 low notes and 1 drifting reply, the kind of sound that had rearranged goats and men for centuries. The patrol's footfalls turned like a school of fish. They moved away, unstartled, certain they'd understood what the valley had told them. They hadn't. They found the first fire team clamped to a rock shelf, their outline a mess of elbows, helmets, and bandages gone stiff. One man's throat rattled shallowly, the visible tug of breath where it met too much swelling. Naomi knelt in a pocket of shadow, hands warm despite the night's bite. She snapped open a small blade and nicked plastic into a barrel. Pen cap, IV tubing. A field crick was an indecency that saved lives. Cut, feel, membranes, open a door in flesh and invite air in. Her fingers went calm and sure, the way they did when a cliff moved underfoot and your body rejected panic as a time waster. "Stay with me," she said into the man's ear. "This will feel wrong, then perfectly right." He clawed at her sleeve, eyes full of a child's shock. Noor's hand found his wrist and held it, the bones inside thin and familiar. The cut opened, the tube slid, the world remembered oxygen. The man's chest loosened. He cried once without sound. Naomi sealed the site with tape and a palm she wouldn't move until the adhesive warmed under her skin. "Out," Hawk murmured from the edge. 3 minutes until the patrol loops back. Wrench, a silhouette with a pack that looked bigger than he did, tugged the sled sideways, found the angle that turned friction into glide. "You're going to love this," he told the aluminum. "You'll tell your grandsleds about the night you flew." They were a rope of motion, threading between rocks that teeth, bending around the sudden, filthy breath of a cave where bats dreamt, sliding by a rusted washing machine that had somehow gotten itself 2 ridgelines up from the nearest doorframe, a joke the mountain had told to itself and left for later. Hawk's shots came only once, 2 thin needles of sound that found a pair of glints in the scrub and turned them into silence. He wanted more. Naomi could feel it in the rhythm of his steps, the way his head tipped to catch angles. "Don't," Naomi said, a whisper tethered to a command. "Not that debt. Not tonight." He didn't answer, but his rifle turned back toward the darkness where their lives were. Rally Point Aspen loomed out of the black, a collapsed caravanserai ribbed with old timber, its archways gnawed down to their knuckle bones. The space smelled like dust that had forgotten rain. Naomi counted bays with her lamp low against her chest to starve the light. "Here, here, and here," she said. They slid bodies into the shadows. A Marine with a fever clenched his teeth and tried to stand, knees locking into something that looked like bravery. Naomi touched his shoulder, and the fury bled out of him like heat with nowhere to go. Noor painted glyphs on stones at knee height, a crescent for water, a vertical line for stay, 2 dots and a short dash for we will return. Language in mud, made for fingers. Down slope, radio squawk pecked at the night. Wrench crouched, cracked open a dead comms brick, rewired its stubborn guts with a pocket light gnawed down to a glow. He toggled bursts of static and half-words into the far rocks, a decoy chatter that chirped where no one actually was. The patrol drifted toward the phantom. Naomi felt the whole hillside shift, like a herd turning its heads. She should have been shaking by then, the way adrenaline demanded you shake when your skin had kept you long enough to make it statistical. She wasn't. The tremor that had brushed her hands when a dog tag flashed at dawn was gone. Her body had made a decision with the rest of her and stopped arguing. They took 4 more and kissed the stone walls with the briefest touch of a palm when they passed. "Here, alive. Here, next. Here, with you,"
He grunted. But the day he'd once promised himself, a day of scores settled like ledgers, moved 1 step further from him and into smoke. They slid the last sled into Aspen's teeth, cut the straps with a click of metal on webbing, and retreated on quiet feet, leaving behind the faint warmth the human body gives rock if it rests long enough to do the kindness. By the time they folded back into the culvert, it was closer to morning than midnight. Naomi's shoulders throbbed. Her fingers had turned into the kind of precise ache you ignore until you see something that requires a precise hand again. She took inventory with a pen nub and a ticking brain. 6 saved, 21 on the ledger waiting. Hours left, a handful. Outside, something metallic kissed stone and went away. Night breathed. The culvert breathed with it. "Dawn," Naomi said to the room and to herself. "We widen the net." Morning blew into the saddle like an open door. The light found a place that wasn't a place, an irregular flat of packed earth and scattered stone, framed on 3 sides by old retaining walls and on the 4th by a cliff that dropped to a view of everything a person could die from. Naomi looked at it and saw a hospital. FOB Mercy, Wrench announced, because giving things names made them hold together longer. He locked a car hood onto two stanchions made from broken rifle stocks and a pry bar, creating a slick table that could be hosed with canteen water and righteousness. Admitting, he added, patting it, you'll like it here. Ponchos became walls when proofed with duct tape. Tarps angled into roofs. Vehicle doors, divorced from their trucks, stood on cinder-block ankles as partition dividers. Someone strung paracord between two dead trees, and the line started collecting triage tags like a rosary for the living. Naomi squared the space with her hands, then with her voice. Gold is salvageable with intervention. Silver is stable with monitoring. Black is... You know what black is. We do not apologize for black. We honor it by not wasting the time we owe gold. She assigned fighters to corners of litters and told them they were carriers now. No one argued long. The ones who did snapped out of it when Hawk looked at them the way a mountain looks at weather, patiently, with the knowledge that it outlasts things. Suction hummed. Wrench had laid a quilt of solar blankets across a broken waist-high wall and clipped them into a battery array that he'd bribed into life with whispers and friction. The hacked SAT handset pulsed a green diode like an alien heart. Noor hunched over a torn paper atlas, copying the old Romanized names of wells onto her own map, then painting small mud arrows on nearby rocks at ankle level, a private signage for people who kept their heads down. A Marine's panic flared. His chest went piston fast, his hands claws at his strap like it was a snake. Naomi stepped into him, close enough that he had to pick her or panic as his next intimacy. Square. 4 in, hold. 4 out, hold. Her father's cadence. The one he'd run with her over a kitchen table, over the hiss of onions in a pan, over the thunder of fireworks that made a girl close her eyes and swallow terror like it could stay down. 4 in, good, hold. 4 out, see? You're deciding. Keep deciding. He did. The strap admitted it was webbing again, and not a constrictor. He cried. He hid it poorly. She pretended not to see, as a gift. Hawk walked the perimeter with lengths of thin line and small bits of metal. He tied ratlines to nubs of stone so it tugged with jingle bells, spent casings, and a constellation of pebbles in tin cups. Noisy in 10 directions, incoherent to anyone who hadn't chosen the pattern to begin with. His rifle moved with him like a shoulder blade. Noor walked the saddle with a folded piece of paper tucked into her sleeve, a list of phrases you could say to a valley that would keep you from being eaten by it. She knelt by a well that lied about being dry for years and listened with her whole face. When she rose, she knew which village would trade silence for water repairs and which would not trade anything for anyone's blood. The drone announced itself as a buzz, then a mosquito whine, then the sound you get when you rub foil against your own fillings. Hawk looked up. Noor didn't. If I can't see it, it can't see me, he muttered to a cable. The hacked SAT handset blinked and finally coughed a dribble of bits into Noor's lap. Supply statuses, weather, a reprimand from a voice that never got sand in its teeth. Cease all unauthorized movement. Medical personnel remain in place. Any personnel following Vega's plan will face punitive action and loss of benefits. Signed with Cortez's certainty and a timestamp that meant someone in an air-conditioned room had decided to send it exactly when it would hurt most. Naomi read it aloud. She didn't sweeten it. When she finished, she folded the paper down the crease and tucked it into her vest. I'm not going to lie to you. If you walk with me, you may lose things you think you can't live without. Her hand landed on the table without meaning to, as if the metal wanted proof of her.
Hawk stepped forward and took a Sharpie. He scrawled his name under the note she'd written on Monroe's plate, then on the map edge beside their roots. Wrench signed with a stylized wrench. Noor added her name in Arabic, then printed Noor for the Marines who would twist it into Nora no matter how many times she corrected them. One by one, hands made names into a net to catch what came next. "Bird beacon," Wrench said, holding up the hacked handset like a secular talisman. "Downed crew pinged. 2 ridges over, north face. That route's a broken ankle waiting to happen." "Then we bring ankles worth breaking," Naomi said. "We divert. We pull them." "Our meds," a corpsman started. Naomi's face lay still and transparent as water in a glass. "We will always be short. That is not new. We will be smart." Wrench went to his kit and came back with a crate that smelled like bad ideas. He knelt and mixed diesel, motor oil, and the powdered promise of potassium nitrate, then fed the paste into canisters wired with fuses peeled from signal flares. "Smoke," he said. "Home-brewed and ugly. Enough to blind a sniper half a valley away and make him think the air hates him." Hawk tested the wind with 2 fingers raised, and a memory of being 16 on a range in a state that didn't yet know what he would make it do. "North by northeast," he judged. "We set smoke on the leeward side, let it wrap uphill." "Tag you gold," Naomi told the team. "Silver holds at Mercy with 1 corpsman and 2 carriers. Black, I'll sit with black before we lift." The black bays were quiet. Naomi moved among them, thumb on a knuckle, voice tuned to the pitch that makes the nervous system unclench. She didn't say forgiveness or sorry or God. She said names when she had them, and the truth when she didn't. "I'm here," she told a man whose pupils were ocean-widening. "I won't leave you to die alone." The breath he released had been waiting years for permission. She stood, and the world tilted. She let it. Then she straightened it. Newer's eyes tracked a crow that had come to see what humans do when they pretend to be larger than the ground that wants them. "Cortez is listening," she said, nodding at the buzzing sky. "We send needs, not home." "Needs," Naomi agreed. She leaned over the SAT handset and reported only what would move a conscience without a coordinate. Blood types, numbers, exposure risks, the lifespan of antibiotics in this heat, the shape of a worsening infection curve. She signed it with her rank, and then with the phrase her father had made her write in a notebook until her hand learned it. "First order is life." The drone's whine dwindled into the kind of silence you only get when machines go to watch from another valley. The saddle inhaled. FOB Mercy exhaled. "Move," Naomi said, and picked up the front left corner of the first sled. The aluminum was warm under her palm. The sun had found them. It would not hold them forever. At headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Cortez stared at a wall of grainy ISR feeds, heat signatures crawling through canyons, a flicker of red tarps in the saddle that wasn't supposed to exist. Her jaw flexed once before she spoke. "Freeze that," she ordered. The operator magnified the blur. "A makeshift canopy, too organized to be luck. That's Vega's position. She's running an unauthorized mash out there." On the mountain, Naomi felt the buzz before hearing it, the faint, insectile vibration of the SAT handset waking. Noor retrieved the packet, decrypting until Cortez's words bled across the small screen. "Cease all unauthorized activity. Lieutenant Vega will stand down immediately. Reinforcements inbound. Any continuation of movement constitutes mutiny." She read it aloud. The wind did not carry it away. The men and women in the saddle waited. "If you want to stop, stop now. No judgment. But if we freeze, we lose everyone north of Ridge 7. Her voice didn't rise. It deepened, slow and steady. A medic's tone turned to command. Hawk stepped forward first, the veins in his neck showing. "You're not alone in this," he said. He scrawled his name under the message with his marker. One by one, the others followed. Wrench's blocky initials, Newer's neat Arabic script, and a handful of shaky signatures from wounded Marines who could still hold a pen. Naomi felt the paper's weight double in her hand. Defiance now had witnesses. Wrench broke the silence. "Beacon ping, ma'am. Bird went down 2 ridges north.
Crew alive, squawking for rescue. We're the only ones close. Naomi exhaled through her teeth. Then we go. Hawk's brow tightened. That's suicide. It's triage. We save who we can reach. Wrench's workshop came alive. He packed diesel, motor oil, and nitrate into canisters. Homemade smoke bombs that coughed black plumes dense enough to blind snipers half a valley away and make him think the air hates him. Fog of war, brought to you by me, he said, lighting one for test. The smoke curled upward, metallic and mean. Naomi divided the teams. The stretcher detail stayed behind under Noor's supervision, while she led Hawk and Wrench into the ravine. They moved low, lungs and boots burning. Every sound had consequence. Twice, Hawk froze them with a raised hand. Twice, Wrench muttered prayers into the dirt.
They found the helicopter crew wedged into a crevice, one pilot dead, the others bleeding from shrapnel. Naomi crawled under the wreck, her helmet scraping metal, and slid a tourniquet up a thigh slick with blood. "Hold," she said. "We'll carry you down." Behind them, the smoke candles hissed. Enemy gunfire cracked through the haze, blind, panicked. The trio staggered downhill, dragging their load through a shroud that smelled like burned oil and hope. By dusk, they were back at Mercy, coughing black soot. Naomi stitched wounds until her gloves turned burgundy. She could feel Cortez's reprimand still vibrating in her vest pocket, but she no longer heard it. Orders had become static. The pulse in her hands was the only signal that mattered. When the last pilot stabilized, she sat on a crate, staring into the dark. Hawk dropped beside her. "Hawk's calling you a mutineer," he said. Naomi didn't look up. Then they'll have to redefine the word savior. Above them, the drone hummed and veered off, leaving the night open again. The next morning, Noor points toward the valley. "We need allies," she says. "And the only path goes through Sang-e-Noor." Sang-e-Noor slept against the mountains like an old scar. Terraced fields clinging to dry earth, roofs patched with tin. As the Marines approached, villagers appeared in doorways, their faces unreadable beneath scarves and sunburn. Hawk's finger hovered near his trigger. Naomi's hand pressed it down. Holster first. No one trusts a visitor who walks in ready to shoot. The village elder, Gul Bibi, met them in the square. Her eyes were cataract white but sharper than any soldier's. Noor translated with careful honorifics. The old woman listened unmoved, then said, "Shelter is earned. What do you give the wounded when they are not your own?" "Everything I can," Naomi answered through Noor, "because they breathe." Something in that answer softened the elder's stance. She motioned toward a courtyard. "Then work." Naomi set up her triage kit on a woven rug. Children ringed the doorway, silent, watching. She cleaned scabies sores, drained abscesses, and coaxed a failing heart with a scavenged beta-blocker pill, halved and halved again. Noor moved among the crowd, taking notes in Dori and English both. Supply needs, trust offered, promises owed. Meanwhile, Wrench crouched by the dry well, sleeves rolled, tools clinking like bells. He replaced a corroded impeller with a helicopter rotor part and coaxed water from the earth. The villagers' murmurs shifted from suspicion to relief. "Look at that," he said, wiping his brow. "Plumbers' Union, Afghanistan chapter." Hawk kept guard near the gate. His gaze locked on a man in militia garb leaning against the wall. His eyes narrowed, recognition blooming. "You," he spat in Pashto. "You were in Tengi raid." Hawk stiffened. His rifle rose a fraction. Noor stepped between them, voice urgent. "He says you saved his cousin, the woman with the broken leg. Do you remember?" Hawk blinked, memory surfacing like a diver gasping air. "Yeah," he said. "I remember." The man nodded once, grudging. The temperature of the air changed. The gate stayed open. That night, Naomi and Noor sat beside Gul Bibi's hearth. The elder sipped tea that tasted of smoke and mint. "The river above the pass will be broken at midnight," she said through Noor.
They plan to flood your wounded from their holes. The mountain will drink their blood. Naomi's eyes darkened. You're sure? I was young when I learned to listen for lies. I have not forgotten the sound. Naomi rose. Then we moved them. Now. Outside, Mercy's silhouette shimmered against the stars. Hawk paced, nerves tight. Noor caught his arm. We have warning because we helped them, she said. That's the lesson. He nodded slowly. Or the gamble. As they broke camp, Wrench stirred for the first time since the blast, eyes blinking open to chaos. His voice came rough, a commander awakening to a rebellion in motion. Lieutenant Vega, what the hell are you doing? Naomi turned toward him, calm in the torchlight. Saving what's left of us, sir. With or without permission. Captain Elijah Monroe came back to consciousness like a diver breaking through ice, gasping, blinking, and staring at a world that didn't match the one that he'd left. The first thing he saw was movement. Marines hauling stretchers, Noor shouting in directions to villagers helping carry supplies, and Naomi Vega, helmet off, hair matted with dust, orchestrating the entire operation with a tone that brooked no argument.
He tried to rise and failed. His left shoulder screamed under its dressing. "Lieutenant," he croaked, "status." Naomi turned, relief flickering through her eyes before discipline reclaimed her face. "Sir, we've relocated Mercy to avoid the flood. The wounded are stable. We're executing evacuation through the irrigation tunnels." "Under whose orders?" His voice sharpened. "Mine." The word hung in the air, bold as a gunshot. The courtyard stilled. Even the villagers paused their work. Monroe's gaze hardened, weighing her insubordination against the movement around him, the life still present because of it. "You defied HQ." "Yes, sir." Naomi met his eyes. "And if I hadn't, we'd all be dead by sunrise." Monroe pushed himself upright with his good arm, gritting his teeth. "You don't get to decide that." Naomi stepped closer, voice steady but fierce. "Someone had to. With respect, sir, command isn't just giving orders, it's owning consequences. You taught me that." That last sentence landed like a blade. Hawk stood nearby, silent, his rifle hanging at rest, eyes darting between them. Noor approached, a map unrolled in her hands. "We have 40 minutes before the sluice gates open. Water will come through the ravine like a hammer." "Then we move now," Naomi said. "Tunnels east, through the terraces. Wrench's model proves they'll hold." "Model?" Monroe blinked. "Demonstration, sir," Wrench said, appearing from behind a truck tire. He'd sculpted a crude topography in the dirt, using bottles of water to show how the flood would behave. When he tilted one, a river of mud raced down, washing over a pebble marked Mercy. "That's us, unless we go underground." Monroe stared. His instincts screamed to reassert control, to take command back. But the evidence was there, undeniable. "You have 1 hour," he said finally. "Then I decide." Naomi nodded once. "That's all I need." They moved fast, lit by red headlamps and adrenaline. The tunnels were shoulder-high conduits carved generations ago to feed the valley's crops. Noor led with a flashlight tied to her wrist, following the damp scent of earth and limestone. "Smells like ghosts," Wrench muttered, squeezing through a narrow turn. "Ghosts don't flood," Noor said without looking back. "Keep up." Behind them, Naomi and Hawk half-carried Monroe, whose strength was coming back in uneven bursts. "You still think you're in charge," he muttered. "I don't think, sir. I adapt." At the third bend, the tunnel widened. They paused to rest. Naomi checked her map, breath steady. Hawk leaned against the wall, light cutting across his face. "You were right to stand your ground," he said quietly. "I didn't stand my ground, I moved it." Outside, the first tremor rolled through the earth, a distant rumble like thunder dragged along stone. Noor lifted her head. "They opened it," she said.
Water roared down the main wadi, tearing through Mercy's old position. The sound was monstrous, alive. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second, picturing the empty cots they'd left behind, then opened them again. "Keep moving." They moved through the last tunnel and emerged onto higher ground, soaked in sweat and dust. Behind them, a wall of brown water chewed through the valley floor, swallowing everything they'd built. Monroe stared at it, awe and guilt mingling in his expression. "You saved us," he said quietly. Naomi looked back at him. "No, sir. We saved each other." He gave the smallest nod, an old world cracking open just enough for something new to breathe inside. They had escaped the flood, but not pursuit. Distant gunfire echoed down the valley. The insurgents had seen the move and were coming hard. Naomi began to draw what she called the corridor.
The terrain ahead narrowed into a stretch of cliff-lined trail. 3 kilometers of rock, rubble, and death waiting to happen. "We'll make it work for us," she told the team. "A moving corridor. We draw them in, control what collapses." Wrench grinned through exhaustion. "You want me to make the mountain fight for us? I can do that." He went to work, stringing monofilament wire through piles of scree, balancing stones that would cascade like dominoes when kicked loose. The wind howled through the canyons, making the trip cords hum like harp strings. Hawk scouted ahead, marking safe feet with chalk arrows shaped like wings. "Step wrong," he warned, "and you'll meet my art project." Noor coordinated with a small team of villagers who'd followed them from Sangay-Noor. She sent Gul Bibi's nephew with a herd of goats along the opposite ridge, raising a storm of dust, a false column meant to draw fire. As the trap set, Naomi worked triage. One Marine gasped through a punctured lung, hooked to a field ventilator she'd rig-jigged from tubing in a water bladder. 2 others were septic, fever raging. The math was brutal. Hawk knelt beside her. "We can't carry all 3. Naomi's hand hovered over the ventilator. The man's eyes were open, lucid enough to understand. "Save them," he whispered, nodding toward the other 2. "You know I won't last the climb." Her voice cracked. "I can stabilize you." He shook his head weakly. "You already did." She reached for a sedative ampule, injected it gently, then slipped a folded scrap of cloth into his palm, the tag of her own med kit, stenciled Vega. "For your mother," she said. Hawk stood back as she closed his eyes. "That's a hell of a command decision," he murmured. Naomi's jaw set. "No, it's mercy." By twilight, the corridor was alive with ghosts. The first wave of insurgents arrived, reckless, shouting, chasing the decoy dust cloud. Wrench's traps answered with thunder, scree collapsing, boulders tumbling, a rolling percussion that sounded like the earth itself rejecting violence. Hawk fired only when he had to, methodical as a surgeon. Noor relayed signals with flashes from her mirror, guiding the Marines through blind turns. Every minute was a heartbeat they didn't own yet. "Keep them guessing," Naomi said over the comm. "We move like smoke." For every meter gained, another cost was paid. Wrench's pack caught shrapnel. He stumbled but kept grinning. "Still pretty, right? Boom choreography!" Naomi laughed once, a sound she didn't recognize as her own, the kind that comes when exhaustion and faith collide. Then the radio flared, Cortez's voice filtered through static. "Lieutenant Vega, cease movement immediately. You are endangering your unit. HQ is authorizing drone dazzlers if you proceed." Naomi stared into the dark sky. "Then blind us," she whispered. Seconds later, the night erupted in strobe flashes, white-hot pulses that turned depth into chaos. "Reflective blankets," she shouted. Marines threw them over the wounded, over themselves, the aluminum scatter confusing the sensors. The lights flickered out, and silence returned. When it was over, only the wind spoke.
Naomi crouched beside Wrench, pressing her forehead to his helmet. "We're through," she said. "You did it!" He gave a ragged chuckle. "Tell HQ their fireworks sucked." They pushed on until dawn painted the ridges in pale fire. Behind them lay the corridor, a trail of traps, sacrifice, and ingenuity. Ahead waited an empty basin, wide and silent, their last stand before extraction. Naomi looked back once. Every echo, every broken stone felt like a name. Then she squared her shoulders. "We move before the storm hits." The air thickened with dust and static. A sandstorm was rolling in, the sky turning the same color as war itself. The first gust hit like a wall. Dust slammed into the basin, turning daylight into brass fog. The air thickened until sound became texture. Every shout chewed into static. Naomi wrapped a scarf over her mouth, blinked grit from her eyes, and yelled, "Circle the wounded! Tape lines now!" They formed a human compass around the stretchers, connecting wrists with cord and white engineer's tape so no one would drift away. Visibility dropped to nothing. It was like existing inside a heartbeat. Pulse, breath, wind. Monroe crawled between them, his uniform shredded, shoulder bleeding through fresh gauze. "We're blind," he said. "Then we move by rhythm," Naomi answered. She counted out loud, calm and low. "Breathe in for 4. Hold. Breathe out for 4. Hold." Her voice was a metronome against chaos. One by one the circle synchronized, a collective lung surviving the storm.
A Marine panicked and fired blindly. Hawk launched himself across the dirt, pinning the shooter before friendly fire could spread. "It's wind, not ghosts," he shouted. The man sobbed, weapon shaking. Hawk pressed his forehead to his. "We're alive. Focus on that." Nearby, Noor held on to Naomi by a tethered cord, eyes squeezed shut. She counted her own steps softly in Dari, guiding them through the whiteout by sound alone. Wrench lost a pack to the wind, but tore bayonets free to splint a broken leg. His hand shook, not from fear, but from fatigue past human measure. Then, through the din, Monroe saw it first, the faint glow of the storm thinning, a flicker of open sky beyond the veil. He grabbed Naomi's shoulder. "There, riverbed." They staggered toward it, half crawling, dragging the wounded in makeshift sleds. When the dust finally broke, they were standing on cracked clay, light blinding after hours of blindness. Naomi lifted her head. Above the wind came a new sound, a low chop, deepening. Helicopters. Relief surged through the survivors like voltage, but then came the counterpoint, the thin, high whine of incoming rockets. "Positions," she shouted. "We're not done yet." The horizon burned with motion, 2 MEDVAC birds descending under enemy fire. RPGs traced O-ring scars across the sky. Naomi barked orders through smoke. "Smoke canisters. Hawk, Wrench, your rear guard. Noor, start the evac line." Wrench lit the canisters, thick plumes coiled upward, turning the basin into a storm within a storm. Hawk and Monroe alternated firing patterns, 5-second intervals to fake a full squad. Each burst bought another heartbeat for the wounded. Naomi directed the load order, gold tags first, then silver. "Nobody gets left," she said, though she knew some wouldn't make it. The final helicopter hovered, rotors hammering sand. "That's it," Wrench yelled. "We're out of time." "Everyone aboard," she said. "I ride last." Monroe grabbed her arm. "That's an order reversal, Lieutenant." She met his eyes. "So court-martial me later." He hesitated, then nodded once, the rarest kind of salute. As the last stretcher cleared, Wrench detonated his final charge. A wall of shale collapsed behind them, sealing the basin. The explosion rolled like thunder, swallowing pursuit. When the helicopter lifted, Naomi looked down. The desert below was empty again, as if war itself had exhaled and moved on. Epilogue.
Weeks later, a tribunal convened in a sterile hall. Cortez read Naomi's report aloud. 5 days, 456 Marines, 312 saved. Her voice cracked once before she caught herself. Monroe testified, "She disobeyed me to obey the mission." Nor was granted protection status, Wrench a medal for engineering valor. Hawk left a single dog tag at a memorial wall and finally slept. Naomi was offered a post to rewrite battlefield medical doctrine. She agreed on one condition, a new clause carved into regulation. In catastrophic communication loss, the medic's first order is life. Months later, she stood in a training hall, teaching recruits to lead from mercy. Above the door, etched in steel, were her father's words. A medic's first order isn't obedience, it's life. Outside, far off, helicopter rotors faded into silence. Not an ending, but a heartbeat continuing. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.